tournament tactics, winning tips and techniques. And it's all designed to help you become a better bass angler. This is the Gander Mountain Invitational Pro-Am Bass Tour, brought to you by Dodge Trucks, Mercury Marine, Triton Boats, and Rapala Lures. Summer peak on the Whitefish Chain, not only for the bass, but for the boaters, and both are virtually everywhere. As one of Minnesota's most popular tourist destinations, Whitefish is teeming with traffic in midsummer. Skiers, cruisers, pontooners, and partiers, all drawn to the chain to drink in the beauty of this North Country gem. Consisting of more than a dozen individual lakes, each with its own unique habitat and structure, the Whitefish offers a myriad of options for bass anglers. Depending on which part of the chain you're fishing, the bass will be shallow, deep, and everywhere in between. Dockfish, slopfish, flatsfish, weedline fish. The trick is finding the right fish to win this tourney. Big females should be concentrated and willing to bite. But where? Deep weedlines could be the key, and Whitefish is loaded with them. But then again, the more active bass, the feeding bass, often choose the flats for their food source, cruising acres of cabbage-covered shallows in pursuit of bait fish. These fish are moving and seldom hold on one spot or another. You'll catch fish all day long, but will they be the 3 and 4 pounders you need to get in the money? Anglers will be in the search and destroy mode. Cover water fast with horizontal presentations like topwaters, spinnerbaits, and cranks. Then, once you make contact, you slow down and target specific locations with vertical pinpoint tackle, like a jig and craw, Texas rig, or a drop shot. It's the age-old question, shallow or deep. Savvy anglers look for spots that offer both options. Main lake feeding flats with close access to deep water. And there are plenty of areas that fit the bill on whitefish. Problem is, if the fish aren't going on one spot, the next spot may be a dozen lakes and 10 miles away, through traffic-clogged channels and a gauntlet of recreational boaters.
A lot of my fishing is going to be done in no-wake zone, so I'm going to have to get on it right away in the morning before all the boat traffic stirs the water up. I think that hinders the fishing a little bit.
And here's another twist. Another pro bass tournament is scheduled the day before the Gander event, which means the fish will have been heavily pressured and picked over. How that affects the bite is anyone's guess. Let's hope that old adage, "you should have been here yesterday," doesn't come into play.
You know, what we're hoping is a lot of the guys are going to not fish their good water, and you know, so the stuff will be left there for the Sunday tournament.
It's another big challenge for the Gander pros as they wind down to the season championship later this month. Stick around. We'll be back to get in on some pre-fish strategy.
Water fishermen, you can fish docks and lily pads and cabbage, and if you're a mid-range guy and you want to flip a jig, I mean, the jig guy can catch fish. The weed line, say majority of the fish are caught on the weed lines. It caters to just pretty much all types of fishing and all fishermen.
As we ride along with the Gander Mountain pros in practice, many of them seem to have one pattern in mind: edges. Whether it's shoreline vegetation or main lake humps, summer bass tend to set up in ambush positions along the edges of the weed growth, ready to pounce on unwary passers-by. On whitefish, that narrows it down to about a zillion spots. The trick is finding the right edges, holding the right fish.
A lot of times you come up to a point where the point sticks out of the lake 200-300 yards, but off of that point there's maybe several other little tiny points that maybe are only 10 feet wide and 5 feet long or something, and they're just little bit of spots that cause an inside turn in it, and the fish tend to congregate in them areas. Big, but keeper. Another real deadly way to fish in it, especially if it's calm out. I mean, I'm still fishing this on the weed line, so the bait's still in 12 to 15 feet of water, but just hooking a worm right through the middle, called wacky style, and then just let it float to the bottom.
In summer, bait fish tend to school and suspend in deep water, ever on the move in search of the tiny bugs and plankton they feed on. And where do they live? In the weeds. So if you were a big hungry bass, you'd probably want to find a spot where huge schools of bait fish swim by on a pretty regular basis. Deep water weed lines.
Another little one. Hey, look at that. They're everywhere here on the Whitefish Chain. Never fished this spot. Pulled up to it. There we go. I just look for basically points, inside turns, but one key thing, they've got to have some harder bottom to it. Either rock, very hard, a sand type, and some nice weeds, some coontail. You get some nice beds of coontail out here that these bigger fish typically, relate to. But another big fish spot is cabbage. If you find cabbage with coontail, deeper weeds, you got some bigger fish there.
You can't see deep water weed lines. Anglers will have to use their electronics, their experience, their savvy, and their skill to weed out the winning fish, to find the spot on the spot. Cuts, points, pockets, places the big fish live. And then they've got to get them to bite.
I guess when I was about 2 years old, I've been brought up in a boat fishing outside weed lines and inside weed lines with my dad. With a 6-inch culprit worm and about an 1/8-ounce mushroom head jig. I guess that's my favorite way to fish because that's how I was brought up. Sometimes I'll throw on a pig and jig and try and get some bigger fish. But that's my favorite way to fish. Get on the outside of them weeds and read the flasher, and hopefully my FL10 will keep me right there. Kind of do it just like that. Grab 8 quick ones off the weed line and go to the docks and see if you can get bigger ones.
Another decent fish, solid, 2 pounds. Actually, I'll spend my entire day on the same type of stuff. I'll start on the deep weed points and weed edges, and I'll just fish them slightly different in the morning than I'll fish them in the afternoon. Right away in the morning, I'll throw topwater baits and see if I can get the fish to come up. But in the afternoon, I'll fish the same type of structure. I'll just be fishing it a little different. I'll throw jungle jigs into the weeds and fish a little more vertically and a little slower.
I think on this particular body of water, why the topwater baits are so good is I've noticed that a lot of these bluegills are suspending out in 15 to 20 feet of water, and that's where I've got some of my biggest topwater fish, but I don't seem to see the bait fish in shallow where they typically are. So I have no idea what makes the bait fish and the sunfish pull way out like this. But I caught some largemouth bass on this pop-R in 30 feet of water.
You can cover a lot of water with the crankbait. Pretty versatile. Fish like it, and easy to find them. And then a lot of times you can slow down and fish the tube or the worm. And the weeds are out there right where we're casting to, and we're just kind of working it right down the edge of the weeds, through them a little bit, into the outside edge and back to the boat. Just had to get in the right area down here this morning.
So it seems deep weeds are the key. But that's not to say the winning pattern won't come from the docks or the shallow water slop.
There's definitely big fish in the lily pads here. I fished a lot of good stretches of lily pads and haven't really caught any big ones. I've caught a couple little ones, had some blow-ups, seen a couple nice ones, but just it doesn't seem like they're in there feeding right now. Now that could all change by the time the tournament comes, but there'll definitely be a couple guys that's all they do is fish frogs, and they will catch some big fish.
And perhaps the biggest obstacle facing many pros this week has nothing to do with the fish or the fishery. This is the last opportunity to qualify for the $75,000 Tournament of Champions. So the pressure is on.
As far as winning Angler of the Year, it's me against the fish. I can't control what the other guys do. All I can do is go out here and try to figure out the patterns, try to make the right presentations, and let it be what it'll be.
Being in the Angler of the Year race could affect my strategy in many ways. I would guess on this lake it's not really going to affect my strategy. I'm only in the lead right now by 1 point, so I really need to fish to win. The only way I can guarantee that I'm going to win Angler of the Year is by winning this tournament.
It's not something that you get a chance to do very often, being the most consistent Angler of the Year. I know guys who've been fishing this circuit for 30 years or fishing bass circuits similar to this for 30 years and never even been in this opportunity or had this opportunity. I just feel real fortunate, and the guys that I'm going against it, I mean, fishing against my best friend for Angler of the Year, it's kind of a fun side deal too.
It would be tough to come up with a more exciting script, but on the tournament stage, bass are notorious for throwing in an occasional ad lib. We'll see how it all plays out when we come back for tournament. Day of finales dawns cool and mirror calm in northern Minnesota. For over 100 of the best bass anglers in the upper Midwest, the wait is over. The patterns are defined and the presentation's polished. All that's left to do is make sure the knots are strong and the hooks razor sharp. The tension is obvious as the Pro-Am teams idle toward the foam-churning blast-off. So much is riding on a single day of fishing. The $10,000 first place prize, the Minnesota Division Angler of the Year title, and the final qualifying spots for the Elite Tournament of Champions, all just 8 solid bites away. We start our tournament day tour with Jeremy Keel, who's working a mid-lake weed hump and working over a school of smaller fish. But there are a few solid keepers mixed in, making it tough to pull up stakes. Angler of the Year leader Chad Johnson's day is off to a difficult start, and it has nothing to do with the fish.
We're here watching Chad Johnson. He's getting ready to leave. He was boat 90 out. He didn't get on a spot. Gentleman's got his marker out here on the spot Chad wanted to fish. Couldn't get on it. He's got 4 small fish in the boat. He's going to go try another spot quick, and then he's going to go jigworm fish and see if he can get the rest of his limit. That's what happens when you get a late boat number. Sometimes you don't get the sweet spot.
But sometimes the grass is greener on the other side of the lake, and Johnson quickly sticks a nice keeper on spot number 2. As expected, the deep weed lines are paying dividends. Corey Gutenfeller is already upgrading his limit off the deep weeds. And Fox Lake champion Grant Miller has a solid weed edge bite working. Shane Raveling is working deep weeds as well, but rather than going in after them, Raveling is bringing the bass to his bait with top waters.
Watching Shane Raveling here and his co-angler Jim Pinky, they're fishing a main lake flat. They're fishing top water baits. So far, they're the only guys that have a limit. It's about 8:45 or 9:45 So they've had a limit, they say, for an hour. So they're going to be calling up, and they're kind of ahead of the game on some of these other guys.
In Cross Lake, Steve Sandberg is sharing a mid-lake weed flat with Larry Wittig. They're working the same fish on the same structure, but while things are quiet in Wittig's boat, Sandberg has figured out how to make them bite. Sandberg and partner Al Grabowski are closing in on a big deep weed limit, but not all of the nearly 850 bass weighed today will be caught deep. A number of pros are working shallow docks and slop areas, and the fish are responding. Back on the deep weed edge in Upper Whitefish, we find Steve Quinn. Quinn is showing us what can happen when you zero in on the spot. A limit can come pretty quick. Jim Severson has his own spot on the spot, and the fish are coming fast and furious. But so far, they're not the size Jim wants to see. Back in Cross Lake, Steve Sandberg is putting on a clinic in persistence. Sandberg hasn't moved from his small mid-lake weed flat, patiently waiting out bites from what he believes are the right fish. And patience pays off. Will the deep bass tip the Gander Mountain scales, or will the $10,000 whitefish mother load come from some secret shallow sanctuary? We'll find out when we... It's time for the final tally. Tense anglers unload a day's work. Some wonder if they have enough to take home the Whitefish Trophy. Others are taking a shot at the prestigious title of Angler of the Year. while more just hope they weigh enough to qualify for the Elite Tournament of Champions. Limits are plentiful and weights are tight. Big fish are at a premium, but Brad Leiferman found one. This 4.36-pound monster wins the Big Fish prize and locks up a championship invitation for Leiferman. Brad Leitner weighs early and is the first to break the 20-pound barrier.
2023, here's your leader. Let's hear it for him. Mr. Leitner got him good.
Down at the dock, Dave Scallett unloads a solid bag. While back on stage, Brian Krause gets the verdict on his day.
$15.90, not bad job.
Krause is still on the bubble for the championship, and he'll have a painful wait to see if he's earned an invitation. Scallett is next.
Ooh. 21.30. 21.30. Is that official, unofficial lead? 21.30, Dave Scallett. So now he's the best dressed angler in the state, and now he's got the lead at Whitefish for 10 grand.
But the lead will be short-lived as Steve Sandberg lifts his weed flat fish to the scale.
22.86. 22.86, and now Dave just lost 10, went to 5, you went to 10. Do you like that number?
Hey, I ended up with 5. I'm going to talk. I'll take 10 here.
Ooh, all right.
But Sandberg doesn't have that 10 grand in the bank just yet, and past Whitefish champ Dean Capra has the kind of bag that'll make a leader sweat.
1978.
Capra comes up short, but a 6th place finish will ensure a spot in the Tournament of Champions. Jerry Curtis is next to challenge Sandberg.
1972 might be enough to get you there. We had some guys dropping back.
Curtis will settle for 5th. Finally, it comes down to Travis Peterson.
What do you got for these guys? Ooh, he's hammering each other. He likes to wait. What do you got? 20.69. Good weight.
A solid weight, but not quite enough. Peterson will finish 3rd, making Steve Sandberg the Gander Mountain Invitational Pro-Am Bass Tour Whitefish Chain champion.
Al and I had a great day today out on the Whitefish Chain. We were able to find some fish that some other anglers weren't fishing, and we caught them on the Creature lure by All Terrain Tackle. And we caught a lot of our keeper fish today actually on a Selmo crankbait, which we're able to tick the tops of the weeds to get some reaction strikes out of those fish. That's what really put us over the top and allowed us to have a good day today.
Another winning lesson is keyed by patience and diversity. Sandberg knew the fish he needed were on one specific spot, and showing those fish a diverse combination of a flashy reaction lure followed by a slow subtle bait was the key to putting the winning fish in the boat. Congratulations, Steve, on a super tournament and a super season. In the race for the coveted Angler of the Year title, Chad Johnson.
Fish just like this. Get the net up.
Go, 26, 49. Get him.
In looking back at this season's Gander Mountain Invitational Pro-Am Bass Tour, one word comes to mind: extreme. Extreme weather, extreme lake diversity, extreme feast or famine.
Oh, there we go, baby. What we're looking for right here, baby.
This year, the Gander Mountain Tour expanded its boundaries beyond its Minnesota roots to include tournaments in Wisconsin and Illinois. The 12 qualifying events, 4 in each state, presented anglers with challenges ranging from sprawling shallow prairie lakes to raging snag-infested rivers to the formidable fury of the Great Lakes.
Ooh. Oh.
Every venue had its pitfalls, and every venue had its payoffs, with a guaranteed first-place prize of $10,000 per event. Big money and big pressure.
There you go. Nice job. This is what was here. It's still here. They're here. We just got to get them to go. Atta boy.
From early spring to late summer, the anglers battled, following the bass through their seasonal movements and patterns, amidst every type of habitat imaginable. Backwaters, channels, rock, wood, and weeds. Of the hundreds of pros in competition, only 3 would prevail to win the prestigious Angler of the Year title from each division. And only 1 will walk away victorious, competing against anglers in all 3 divisions for more than $75,000 in cash and prizes at the Elite Tournament of Champions. Unlike most professional bass circuits, the Gander Mountain Invitational requires the pro and the amateur co-angler to fish as a team. Paired by drawing, they'll work together to put a single bass limit in the boat, and hopefully, big bucks in the bank.
Let's hear it for him, you guys. Come on, you're just looking at the winner here.
The qualifying events are one-day competitions, with anglers allowed 2 days of practice the week of the tournament. Some will have home water advantage, while others will be starting from scratch. And on waters like Minnesota's complex Lake Minnetonka or Wisconsin's massive Green Bay, starting from scratch can be intimidating to say the least. But these are among the most experienced, most accomplished bassers in the business. They're at the top of their game and ready to take on all comers. Sharp skills, sharp hooks, and a sharp eye for the subtle nuances of every pattern are what it takes to win on this level. And these guys have what it takes.
That's the kind we're looking for. Nice Chain of Lakes bass.
The considerable challenges faced by these top pros throughout the season also present an opportunity for us as weekend anglers to watch and learn.
Remember, always watch your line when you're fishing a jig.
How to approach new water.
I'm not making any big run because there's plenty of fish in the places that I've been fishing.
How to better understand the seasonal movements and behavior of the bass.
The fish are kind of lethargic right now. After they spawn, they're recuperating from all the rigors of spawning, you know.
How to gear up and fine-tune our technique and presentation.
What works for me is fishing a sinking worm, rigged wacky style, which means basically just hook it right through the middle of the worm, all the way through, and leave the hook exposed.
It's all coming up right after this. Our cameras first caught up with the Gander Mountain pros on the Fox Chain of Lakes out of Antioch, Illinois. It was April, and a chilly one at that. The bass were pre-spawn, which should have meant easy pickings, at least for the active male fish attracted by warming water. As it turned out, it was anything but.
The change in the weather this week is really going to slow things down a little bit. Fish were starting to move in with the warm temperatures last week. A lot of fish were being caught, a lot of small males, but they were moving. The last couple days have been okay. This morning we were down to 37. We've lost about 3-4 degrees, and the fish are a little slow right now.
The frigid weather was forcing the bass to remain deep and scattered. The typically warmer channels were cold as ice, and so was the bite. Even the home water locals were thrown off their game. Topwaters weren't working, small cranks weren't working, even subtle jig worm presentations just weren't producing any fish. The Fox Chain was deader than a canned mackerel.
I think it's going to be a tough bite for everybody this morning early.
But one angler was able to put it all together. Minnesota pro Grant Miller, winner of the previous season's Gander Mountain Tournament of Champions, had never fished the Fox Chain before. And for him, ignorance was bliss.
It's early spring and the water's still pretty cold. And the fish are shallow, but they're extremely spooky. What works for me is fishing a sinking worm, rigged wacky style, which means basically just hook it right through the middle of the worm, all the way through, and leave the hook exposed. With the fish that's spooky, I need to make long casts up the bank, and I'm not seeing the fish, but I know the fish are there, so I try to put the lure by them and just fish it extremely slow. You need to keep the boat away from the fish, otherwise they'll spook for sure. I like to keep the trolling motor on a low power setting so I don't stir up all the mud and the weeds. Even though the water isn't overly clear, I still am going with a Berkeley Vanish line 8-pound test, which is a pretty finesse line, but I don't want to do anything to spook these fish. You should just inch along the bank, make long casts, let it set a long time,